The dawn of January 2nd, 2025, in Warren, Michigan, presented itself as a canvas of mundane winter normality. For 30-year-old Ashley Elkins, the morning's script was familiar. A brief window of time to herself while her two sons, aged 7 and 10, remained under the care of her younger sister. Her plan was unremarkable, a short trip for errands, the kind of logistical pocket that fuels the engine of a household. She departed in her silver Chevrolet Malibu, a vehicle as ordinary as her intentions. The first documented checkpoint in her day was a local 7-Eleven, where overhead cameras silently recorded her presence. The footage, reviewed only in hindsight, showed a woman in an orange shirt and black jacket, her movements brisk and purposeful, a portrait of everyday life. During this early period, she maintained a light digital tether to her mother, Monica, exchanging sporadic texts that carried the benign rhythm of a typical day. These messages, however, would soon become critical artifacts, the final fragments of a voice about to be silenced. The rupture occurred just after 9 a.m. The textual cadence between mother and daughter halted mid-flow. Monica, prompted by a visceral disquiet from a troubling dream the previous night about Ashley's car being stolen, sent a message referencing the nightmare. The reply she received was brief, linguistically off-kilter, a response that felt dissonant to the mother who knew her daughter's communicative patterns intimately. Then, nothing. Calls to Ashley's phone rang through to voicemail, each unanswered attempt amplifying a primal sense of dread within the family home. What began as a minor scheduling note, a mother running errands, was being violently rewritten into a prologue for a mystery. The ordinary had evaporated, replaced by a vacuum of information where a person should be. This initial silence was the first, subtle crack in reality for Ashley's family, a fissure that would rapidly widen into a chasm, pulling them into a world of frantic searches, pixelated surveillance images, and the grim vocabulary of law enforcement. The clock was now ticking, not on errands, but on a life, and the once clear picture of Ashley's day was blurring into a question mark. As daylight faded on January 2nd, the Elkins family's concern hardened into actionable fear. The casual check-ins had escalated to a full-scale alert. It was in this climate of escalating panic that technology offered a cold, precise clue. Using the Find My network, Ashley's sister accessed the last known location of Ashley's iPhone. The digital pin dropped not on a shopping plaza or a friend's neighborhood, but on a specific address, an apartment complex in the 2900 block of Pinehurst Street, in the adjacent city of Roseville. The familiarity of this address sent a shockwave through the family. This was the residence of DeAndre Booker, Ashley's ex-boyfriend. The relationship, which had lasted approximately a year, had once seen Booker deeply embedded in the family fabric. He had shared holidays, helped with the boys, and been accepted as part of the unit. That integration made the present circumstances all the more unnerving. The couple had parted ways months earlier, and Ashley had been deliberate in creating distance, letting his calls go unanswered. More recently, she had voiced a creeping suspicion to relatives that she felt followed, a shadow of unease she couldn't shake. The context grew even more alarming with the revelation of an incident just days prior, where Booker had attempted to gain entry to Ashley's home under the guise of a client for her in-home hair business, a calculated and deceptive act that underscored a concerning fixation. Armed with this location data, family members, including Ashley's mother, sister, and the father of her children, drove to the Pinehurst address. Their arrival at the complex was met with emptiness. Ashley's car was not in the lot. Knocks on the door of Booker's apartment yielded no response, only a silent threshold that seemed to swallow their calls. This moment was a critical pivot. The investigation was no longer a diffuse search for a missing woman. It was now anchored to a specific point, a specific person from her past. The benign explanation that she had simply stopped by to talk was weighed against the gravity of her disappearance and her recent efforts to disengage from him. The silent apartment became a powerful symbol, a closed door behind which the truth of those missing hours might reside. The family's suspicion, now vocalized to the police, who began their formal investigation, cast a long and pointed shadow over DeAndre Booker, transforming him from a former partner into the central figure in a rapidly darkening narrative. The ensuing days were a torture of suspended animation for Ashley's family and friends, who papered the region with flyers and pleaded publicly for any information. Then, on January 7th, a material breakthrough. Ashley's silver Malibu was located. It sat in the parking lot of a different Roseville apartment complex, approximately 4 miles from Pinehurst Street. The discovery was a double-edged sword. It located a key piece of property, but offered no sign of Ashley herself. More tellingly, the car was unlocked, and the keys had been left on the driver's seat, an odd, almost careless detail that contradicted the behavior of someone planning to return. While this find narrowed the physical search, it deepened the mystery of intent. Concurrently, investigators investigators executing search warrants obtained surveillance footage from cameras at DeAndre Booker's apartment complex. The video from the morning of January 2nd provided a crucial, though incomplete, visual timeline. At 9:14 a.m., a figure matching Ashley's description, wearing the now signature orange shirt and black jacket from the 7-Eleven footage, was seen entering the parking lot and walking toward the apartment buildings. This was the last independent, clear sighting of Ashley Elkins. The tape then ran for hours, a static panorama of the lot. The next moment of significance came in the early afternoon. Two individuals approached Ashley's parked Malibu. One was a man whose clothing and gait suggested DeAndre Booker. The other was a woman. Here, the footage introduced a jarring dissonance. This woman was not wearing Ashley's orange shirt. She was attired in completely different clothing. The pair entered the vehicle. After a brief pause, the woman slid into the driver's seat, and the car exited the lot, turning left and disappearing from the camera's frame. It never returned. This clip was a narrative grenade. It confirmed the car's presence at Booker's home hours after Ashley arrived. It showed the car leaving with two people, one of whom may not have been Ashley at all, and certainly not as she had appeared. The questions it spawned were urgent and labyrinthine. If the woman was Ashley, why and where had she changed her clothes? If it was not Ashley, who was this second woman, and what was her role? The footage did not provide answers, but it powerfully shifted the inquiry from a simple missing persons case toward a scenario involving conscious action, potential disguise, and a vehicle's movement under a new driver's control. The investigation's trajectory turned from suspicion to near certainty on January 4th, when DeAndre Booker himself initiated contact with the Roseville Police Department, reporting a possible break-in at his apartment. When officers arrived to investigate, Booker was not present to meet them. Finding the door to his unit unlocked and slightly ajar, they entered. The scene that greeted them was a study in contradiction and alarm. The air was thick with the overwhelming, acrid odor of cleaning chemicals, with the distinctive scent of bleach predominating. In the living room, signs of a normal life. A laptop on a table, headphones were juxtaposed with the bizarre. A pair of yellow rubber gloves lay discarded on a sofa cushion, as if removed in haste. This was not the chaos of a burglary, it was the eerie order of a staged scene. The officer's attention was drawn down the hallway to the bathroom. Here, the evidence of a profound disturbance became unmistakable. The shower curtain was missing. Two bottles of bleach stood guard, one on the counter and another on the floor beside the bathtub. The drain plug sat conspicuously in the center of the empty tub. An officer, peering into the drain, spotted minute debris lodged within. Using a pair of tweezers, he carefully extracted the material: several strands of hair, a fragment of a dark, coagulated substance, and a single, small silver hoop earring. To the trained eye, more was visible: a constellation of tiny, dark spatter stains on the white bathroom tiles, the lower portion of the door, and the baseboard. The entire area had been wiped, but not well enough to erase the signs of a violent event. The officers immediately recognized the bathroom not as a place of hygiene, but as a potential primary crime scene. They withdrew, sealed the apartment, and called for forensic specialists. The discovery transformed the case, legally and emotionally. No longer were police merely searching for a missing woman. They were now processing a location where she was likely attacked and possibly killed. The bleach, the gloves, the missing curtain, and the biological traces in the drain were not mere clues. They were silent witnesses to a brutal act and a frantic, forensic-aware attempt to erase it. The apartment on Pinehurst Street was no longer just an address. It was a tomb of evidence. The subsequent forensic processing of DeAndre Booker's apartment moved the investigation from the realm of deduction into the domain of scientific fact. A specialized evidence response team entered the sealed unit. Their most powerful tool was luminol, a chemical that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin, causing traces of blood, even those scrubbed invisible to the naked eye, to luminesce with a pale blue glow under darkness. When the lights were switched off, the bathroom and adjoining hallway told a new, horrifying story. Where bleach and cleaning had left surfaces seemingly pristine, the luminol revealed a sprawling, glowing galaxy of impact, spatter, and transfer patterns. The ghostly blue light painted a vivid, unambiguous picture of significant bloodshed, confirming the bathroom as the epicenter of violence. This chemical testimony was corroborated by physical discovery. A police-contracted plumber dismantled the P-trap beneath the bathtub drain. From within the curved pipe, he recovered a small, deformed bullet fragment, a find that suggested a gunshot had been part of the assault, and that efforts to wash evidence down the drain had been partially successful. Later, during a meticulous search of the living room, an officer found a handgun tucked beneath the couch. It was was registered to DeAndre Booker. The narrative within the walls was now horrifically clear. While this interior analysis proceeded, investigators pieced together the exterior timeline from the complex's surveillance footage, focusing on the hours following Ashley's arrival. What emerged was a protracted, grim ballet of disposal. The footage showed a figure, matching Booker's description, engaged in a relentless, hours-long process. He was seen making multiple trips from his building to various dumpsters scattered around the property. He carried black garbage bags, later a shopping cart obtained from a nearby store. The most consequential sequence was captured in the deepest part of the night, at 4:11 a.m. on January 3rd. In near-total darkness, the figure struggled with a large, heavy object in the cart, attempting to lift it into a dumpster. The object fell to the ground before he, with evident strain, managed to deposit it into the container. He spent nearly 5 minutes at the dumpster's mouth. This midnight procession, set against the backdrop of the luminescent horror inside the apartment, formed a coherent and devastating sequence. An act of violence, a frantic cleanup, and a determined effort to dispose of the physical proof under the cover of darkness. The converging lines of evidence from the apartment, the luminol patterns, the bullet fragment, the gun, created a powerful circumstantial case, but prosecutors and investigators sought concrete biological links. To that end, the dumpsters Booker was filmed using were impounded before they could be emptied again. Forensic technicians swabbed their interiors, collecting minute biological samples from the seams and floors of the containers. These samples were subjected to DNA analysis. The results provided the definitive connection they needed. The blood recovered from inside the dumpsters matched the DNA profile of Ashley Elkins. This scientific finding was a watershed moment. It physically placed Ashley's biological material at the exact point of Booker's disposal activities, directly corroborating the video evidence. Shortly after this confirmation, authorities made a public statement to the Elkins family and the media. Based on the evidence, they were now investigating Ashley's disappearance as a homicide. With the dumpster contents already hauled away, the investigation launched its most logistically daunting effort, tracing the waste stream. They followed the route from the Pinehurst complex to a transfer station and ultimately to a specific section of the Pine Tree Acres landfill in Lenox Township, a vast landscape covering over 370 acres. Authorities identified a target zone of approximately 6.5 acres where the relevant trash was believed to be buried. Beginning on January 13th, and for 5 straight days, a coordinated force of officers from 15 different law enforcement agencies undertook a monumental excavation. They formed human chains on the treacherous surface of compacted garbage, sifting through refuse 2 inches at a time. The goal was twofold: to find any additional evidence linked to the crime and, more poignantly, to recover Ashley Elkins's remains to provide her family with burial and closure. The search was a physically and emotionally exhausting testament to the lengths taken, but despite recovering some items for analysis, the primary objective, finding Ashley, remained unmet. The landfill, a monument to what society discards, had swallowed the final secret. While the landfill search represented a physical hunt for evidence, the digital hunt for motive and intent had already reached a conclusive end. Police, having established a clear timeline from the surveillance, tracked DeAndre Booker's movements after his early morning disposal work. Cameras showed him being picked up by an Uber near a pawn shop close to his apartment just before 6 a.m. on January 3rd. The driver's records led investigators to a residence in Flint, Michigan.
It was there, days later, that Booker was located and taken into custody. Significantly, the clothing he was wearing upon arrest, a black coat with a fur-lined hood, dark, ripped jeans, and a black hat, was identical to that worn by the figure in the overnight surveillance footage. Upon his arrest for providing false statements to police, a search warrant was executed for his cell phone. The data extracted from the device did not just support the case, it authored a chilling prelude and postscript to the crime. The search history, time-stamped in the days surrounding January 2nd, revealed a mind meticulously plotting violence and its concealment. In the days prior, he had searched for 9mm silencer, murder out of rage X, and shotgun through pillow. On the very day Ashley disappeared, as he was allegedly cleaning his apartment, he queried, "What happens to trash after it's picked up?" In the aftermath, while in Flint, his searches shifted to self-preservation, how to beat a polygraph, what to do on the run, and delete Google history. This digital trail was arguably the most damning evidence of all. It demonstrated premeditation, revealing the crime was not a spontaneous act of passion, but a considered plan. It showed a conscious awareness awareness of forensic countermeasures, directly explaining the bleach and the dumpster runs. Finally, it illustrated a clear consciousness of guilt in its attempts to evade detection. The phone became a silent witness for the prosecution, a ledger of intent that painted Booker not as a suspect caught in unfortunate circumstances, but as an architect of his own culpability. A persistent and troubling question from the early surveillance footage was the identity of the woman seen driving Ashley's Malibu away from the complex in different clothing. Was she an accomplice? This mystery was definitively solved during DeAndre Booker's preliminary hearing in August 2025, when a young woman named Payne Barksdale took the stand. She was the adopted daughter of Booker's sister, and though close in age, she viewed him as a beloved uncle figure. Payne testified that on the afternoon of January 2nd, Booker called her asking for a favor. He claimed a male co-worker had left a car at his apartment complex that needed to be moved because it was unregistered, and he wanted someone with a valid license to drive it to avoid police trouble. Trusting him, she took an Uber to his apartment. There, she was directed to Ashley's silver Malibu. She drove it to a different location as instructed, leaving the keys on the seat. Before they left the area, she testified that Booker asked her to stop at a specific beauty supply store. While she went inside, he waited in the Uber. Investigators believe this was the moment Ashley's phone was briefly powered back on, a deliberate act to ping a cell tower near the store and create a false digital trail, suggesting Ashley was there after she had already been killed. Payne also stated Booker asked her technical questions about phone tracking, querying whether location could be traced if a phone was off. Her testimony was devastating in its simplicity. It revealed the second woman was not a co-conspirator, but a manipulated relative used as a tool. Booker had exploited her trust to physically remove the victim's car from the scene and to digitally misdirect the investigation. Payne's role transformed from a potential suspect into that of another of Booker's victims, an unwitting agent in the aftermath of a horror she never knew had occurred. DeAndre Booker's journey through the justice system has been characterized by a stark contrast between his personal conduct and the weight of the evidence arrayed against him. His behavior at proceedings has been deliberately obstructive and theatrical. At a pre-trial hearing, he refused to sit in the courtroom, standing silently while Ashley's mother testified. When appearing via video link from jail, he repeatedly screamed and cursed, forcing the judge to mute his audio feed, and he often hid under a blanket, refusing to present himself to the court. This performative defiance stood in sharp relief to the methodical, overwhelming case presented by prosecutors. Over several days in August 2025, the preliminary hearing laid out a vast evidentiary foundation. Law enforcement officers detailed the discovery of the crime scene. Forensic technicians explained the DNA matches from the apartment and dumpsters. Detectives walked through the timeline built from surveillance footage. The evidence log presented to the court contained over 200 individual items, from the gun and bullet fragment to the bleach bottles and the data from Booker's phone. The purpose of the hearing was not to determine guilt, but for a judge to decide if there was sufficient probable cause to bind the case over for trial. Given the volume and coherence of the evidence, the outcome seemed a foregone conclusion. However, the defense successfully argued for a continuance, requesting time to review the extensive transcripts and evidence. The judge agreed, delaying a final ruling for several months. This procedural pause extended the legal limbo for Ashley's family, but it did little to obscure the reality in the courtroom. A near insurmountable mountain of physical, digital, and testimonial evidence pointed irrevocably at one man whose only response was to scream into the void. As the legal machinery grinds forward, the most profound wound for Ashley Elkins's family remains open. She has not been found. The exhaustive landfill search, a heroic effort of manpower and will, concluded without recovering her remains. This lack of physical closure denies her family the fundamental rituals of mourning: a burial, a headstone, a defined place to grieve. Her two sons are left to navigate childhood and beyond with only memories and the haunting absence where their mother should be. In response, the community has rallied, establishing a GoFundMe campaign to create a financial trust for the boy's future, a practical gesture of support in the face of unimaginable loss. Monica Elkins, Ashley's mother, has channeled her anguish into public words that cut to the heart of the betrayal, directly addressing Booker in media interviews, questioning how the man who once played ball with her grandsons could orchestrate the destruction of their mother. The case, while legally progressing toward a trial, remains active in the most painful sense. Investigators hold out hope that new information or a cooperation could yet reveal Ashley's location. For now, the story of Ashley Elkins is suspended between a likely judicial conclusion and an unmet
unmet human need. The evidence paints a clear picture of a crime, but for a family, justice is incomplete without the ability to lay their loved one to rest. Her disappearance is a reminder that some voids can never be filled, and that the search for truth, while it may identify a perpetrator, does not always bring the peace of return. The echoes of her loss continue, a silent testament in a home that is now forever quieter.